যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Thank you for joining the live stream. I know my mic was muted. I did not realize it. Alapan is saying the thumbnail is absolute fire. Thank you. So today we'll be in a very Nietzsche-ish mood and vibe. So we'll discuss a whole lot of Nietzsche and some Bengal politics for some reason, because it's just relevant. Now, we are going to discuss a specific book by Nietzsche, but it is one of the best books I've ever read. It is one of my favorite books of all time. And we may or may not be able to complete this entire book in this one live stream. Chances are high that we won't be able to, because even because of the size, it would take about 4 or 5 hours. But more importantly, the style of writing that Nietzsche has, almost every paragraph can be discussed for half an hour, 45 minutes. But the best part about this book is, no matter how many times you reread it, and from the very beginning, maybe, because someday I intend to read the entire book from our live streams and discuss the entire book. We will begin again from the beginning, and it will be as fun then as it is going to be right now. I myself have read the first 60% of this book about 10-12 times now. I've read the first 10-20 pages to many of my friends, and each time it's profound and brilliant and juicy and stimulating for some new reason. It's just that juicy and deep. Wait, you started on time, all okay? ye chaton ek din to ana hi tha. Yes. Dinner korecho? Yes, before the first live stream. Dada, by which video should I introduce my friend to your channel? Depends on who he is, what his identity is. Different videos appeal to different people. Like, if I approach somebody for a podcast, someone leaning to the right, etc., I immediately throw Sanjeev Sanyal's podcast with me on their faces, and then say, he has come on my podcast, so would you like to be on my podcast as well? After which no one can say no. Yes, people are shocked I'm on time. Fuck. Good evening at midnight. It is, yes, I actually thought right after I made the thumbnail that, what the fuck? I'm writing, in fact, the caption says, tonight at 12:30, an evening with Nietzsche, which makes no fucking sense. But I thought it just sounds nice. An evening with Nietzsche. Hanging out with देखो हो रहा है लाइव स्ट्रीम रात को, इवनिंग विद नीचे है कंटेंट, और थंबनेल में है दिन में दोपहर में पैर के नीचे बैठ के नीचे पाठ पढ़ा रहे हैं. So it's very diverse. Shudeep is saying Dada ki jeyu theken on. Okay, yeah. So Alapan, if you tell me who you intend my channel, who you intend to introduce my channel to, based on that I can suggest something. So guys, beyond good and evil, because that's satya, that's the truth. Reality is beyond good and evil. From critiquing the Christian morality and the philosophers' ideas of truth to propounding Nietzsche's philosophical insights into human psychology, this book explores his conceptions about the free spirit, the virtues of the European culture, nationalism, and the moral concepts of good and evil. A collection of 296 aphorisms, basically tweets, okay? Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil has influenced various philosophers, thinkers, and writers. It continues to remain a quintessential masterpiece. After all, time is relative, yes. A Hindutva 1.5 friend. Oh, great. Then probably, even though the CSK Vanguard project is on hold until 2026 election results, because I don't think BJP will win, which might end up really harmful for us. So it's on hold. But our plans are pretty concretely described in those two live streams. You might suggest the first one or the second one, the recruitment drive one, okay, or the first one. I think the second one is even more. The ideas are more concretized. You can suggest the second one. Okay. So guys, one of the greatest books ever written. ट्वीट कर रहे थे बैठ के, सबका सब ट्वीट मिला के एक बुक बना दिया नीचे ने, छोटे छोटे पैराग्राफ, थॉट्स. Supposing this is the preface, okay? Get ready to think a lot. Think and think and think. Think and come up with comments, please. Not for algorithm today. आज सिर्फ कैपिटलिज्म के लिए नहीं, आज actually हमारे brains के लिए, to make this discussion more fruitful. Supposing that truth is a woman, what then? Is there not ground for suspecting that all philosophers, insofar as they have been dogmatists, have failed to understand women? Understand truth, who is personified as a woman here. That the terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity with which they have usually paid their addresses to truth with capital T, have been unskilled and unseemly methods for winning a woman? Wow. देखो, इसे कहते हैं पहले बॉल में छक्का. कि वुमन के साथ ट्रूथ को वुमन के साथ कंपेयर किया जा रहा है, but not just for fun, not for sounding cool, for a very specific reason, because he is comparing philosophers talking about truth to a man pursuing or trying to court a woman, okay? Were you really able to impress that woman? Were you able to understand that woman? Certainly she has never allowed herself to be won. And at present, every kind of dogma stands with sad and discouraged mind, if indeed it stands at all. For there are scoffers who maintain that it has fallen, that all dogma lies on the ground, nay more, that it is at its last gasp. But to speak seriously, they are so he admits he was joking. He was trolling, and now he says, on a serious note, okay? But to speak seriously, there are good grounds for hoping that all dogmatizing in philosophy, whatever solemn, whatever conclusive and decided airs it has assumed, okay? Airs meaning that kind of a figure of speech, an air of arrogance, etc. That air, okay? A vibe, an aura. So whatever... but to speak seriously, there are good grounds for hoping that all dogmatizing in philosophy, whatever solemn, whatever conclusive and decided airs it has assumed, okay, philosophy, may have been only a noble pluralism and tyrannism. Time to open Google. This will happen repeatedly with Nietzsche, of course. Pluralism means immature and childish behavior. And tyrannism, a state of being a tyro or a beginner. I see. So critically a naive attempt. Holy shit. So right off the gate, he trolls everyone and anyone. Hoping that good grounds for hoping that all dogmatizing in philosophy, in the end, has been only a noble pluralism and tyrannism. And probably the time is at hand when it will be once and again understood what has actually sufficed for the basis of such imposing and absolute philosophical edifices as the dogmatists have hitherto reared. Okay? Dekho. Imposing and basis. What's the basis of such imposing and absolute philosophical edifices as the dogmatists have hitherto reared? Perhaps some popular superstition of immemorial time, such as the soul superstition, which in the form of subject and ego superstition has not yet ceased doing mischief. It has not stopped the superstition of believing in a soul. Okay, perhaps some play upon words, a deception on the part of grammar, or an audacious generalization of very restricted, very personal, very human, all too human facts. Shit. Perhaps some philosophers play on words, a deception on the part of grammar, or an audacious generalization of very restricted, very personal, very human, all too human facts. The philosophy of the dogmatists, it is to be hoped, was only a promise for thousands of years afterwards, as was astrology in still earlier times, in the service of which probably more labor, gold, acuteness, and patience have been spent than on any actual science hitherto. We owe to it and to its quote-unquote super terrestrial pretensions in Asia and Egypt the grand style of architecture. It seems that in order to inscribe themselves upon the heart of humanity with everlasting claims, all great things have first to wander about the earth as enormous and awe-inspiring caricatures. Dogmatic philosophy has been a caricature of this kind. For instance, the Vedanta doctrine in Asia and Platonism in Europe. Let us not be ungrateful to it, although it must certainly be confessed that the worst, the most tiresome, and the most dangerous of errors hitherto has been a dogmatist error, namely Plato's invention of pure spirit and the good in itself. But now, when it has been surmounted, when Europe, rid of this nightmare, can again draw breath freely and at least enjoy a healthier sleep, we whose duty is wakefulness itself. Kya line hai? We whose duty is wakefulness itself are the heirs of all the strength which the struggle against this error has fostered. We are the heirs of all the strength. The strength of what? The strength which the struggle against this error has fostered. Okay? The struggle against that error of Plato, of Plato's ideas. It has fostered a strength of which we are heirs, descendants. Wow. It amounted to the very inversion of truth and the denial of the perspective, the fundamental condition of life, to speak of spirit and the good as Plato spoke of them. Indeed, one might ask, as a physician, how did such a malady attack that finest product of antiquity, Plato? Had the wicked Socrates really corrupted him? Was Socrates, after all, a corrupter of youths and deserved his hemlock? But the struggle against Plato, or to speak plainer, and for the people, the struggle against the ecclesiastical oppression of millenniums of Christianity, because Christianity is Platonism for the people. अरे थॉमस एक्वाइनस ने ये क्या कर दिया? What a line. Christianity is Platonism for the people. Produced in Europe a magnificent tension of soul, such as had not existed anywhere previously. With such a tensely strained bow, arrow यहाँ पे खींचा हुआ है, one can now aim at the furthest goals. As a matter of fact, the European feels this tension as a state of distress, and twice attend the bow. once by means of Jesuitism, and the second time by means of democratic enlightenment, which, with the aid of liberty of the press and newspaper reading, might in fact bring it about that the spirit would not so easily find in itself in distress. The Germans invented gunpowder, all credit to them, but they again made things square. They invented printing. But we, who are neither Jesuits nor Democrats nor even sufficiently Germans, we good Europeans and free, very free spirits, we have it still, all the distress of spirit, and all the tensions of its bow, and perhaps all the arrow, the duty, and who knows, the goal to aim at ... Now, first chapter, Prejudices of Philosophers. This is the quietest the live chat has ever been, so I get it. Everyone is intently listening to this. Good. Kay is saying, today I was explaining my Prof why polarization is not that much issue, because earlier one side didn't have any voice, so it looks polarized. I almost saw my F grade in his eyes, lol. Germans didn't invent gunpowder, did they? No. समझ नहीं आ रहा? Okay, I'll go little more slower and explain more. The only reason I'm explaining is because I have read these portions about 10-20 times. That's why. Prejudices of Philosophers. The will to truth, which is to tempt us to many a hazardous enterprise. The famous truthfulness, of which all philosophers have hitherto spoken with respect. What questions has this will to truth not laid before us? What strange, perplexing, questionable questions? It is already a long story, yet it seems as if it were hardly commenced. Is it any wonder if we at last grow distrustful, lose patience, and turn impatiently away? That this Sphinx teaches us at last to ask questions ourselves. Who is it really that puts questions to us here? What really is this will to truth in us? In fact, we made a long halt at the question as to the origin of this will, until at last we came to an absolute standstill before a yet more fundamental question. We inquired about the value of this will. What's even the fucking point of truth? Granted that we want the truth, why not rather untruth and uncertainty and even ignorance? The problem of the value of truth presented itself before us. Or was it we who presented ourselves before the problem? Which of us is the Oedipus here? Which the Sphinx? It would seem to be a rendezvous of questions and notes of interrogation. And could it be believed that it at last seems to us as if the problem had never been propounded before, as if we were the first to discern it, get a sight of it, and risk raising it? For there is risk in raising it. Perhaps there is no greater risk, the risk being the risk of asking, why truth? Why not untruth, uncertainty? Oh, this was one aphorism, okay? Now, sort of a subchapter or a new tweet, okay? Do you have PDF version of this book? No, I don't have. Are you gay? No. How could anything originate? Okay, now he's trolling again, okay? He's quoting sort of people he dislikes and looks down upon, okay? I'm telling you this only because I have read this portion. So he is basically, I'm setting the context. He's talking about some people in the same way that we talk about the Hindutva 1.0 crowd, okay? How could, he's quoting those people he thinks are stupid, okay? How could anything originate out of its opposite? For example, truth out of error, or the will to truth out of the will to deception, or the generous deed out of selfishness, or the pure sunbright vision of the wise man out of covetousness. Such genesis is impossible. Whoever dreams of it is a fool, nay, worse than a fool. Things of the highest value must have a different origin, an origin of their own. In this transitory, seductive, illusory, paltry world, in this turmoil of delusion and cupidity, they cannot have their source. Okay? He's critiquing Christians, of course. But rather in the lap of being with capital B. But rather, so he's saying that those sorts of Christians are saying these things. They believe that in the lap of being, in the intransitory, in the concealed God, in the quote unquote thing in itself, there must be their source of all good things, and nowhere else. End quote. Now he gives his own opinion. This mode of reasoning discloses the typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all times can be recognized. This mode of valuation is at the back of all their logical procedure. Through this quote unquote belief of theirs, they exert themselves for their quote unquote knowledge, for something that is in the end solemnly christened the truth. ये हो गया, ऐसा रीजनिंग किया और इसको अल्टीमेटली घोषणा कर दिया यही सत्य है. The fundamental belief of metaphysicians is the belief in antithesis of values. Excuse me. It never occurred even to the wariest of them to doubt here on the very threshold, though they had made a solemn vow, de omnibus dubitandum, where doubt, however, was most necessary. They never doubted themselves. They should have doubted. They should have had some doubt. For it may be doubted, firstly, whether antithesis exists at all, and secondly, whether the popular valuations and antithesis of value upon which metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives, besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below frog perspectives, as it were, to borrow an expression current among painters. Okay, low IQ thoughts. In spite of all the value which may belong to the true, the positive, and the unselfish, in spite of all the value which may belong to the true, the positive, and the unselfish, it might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will to delusion, to selfishness and cupidity. It might even be possible that what constitutes the value of those good and respected things consists precisely in their being insidiously related, knotted, and crocheted to these evil and apparently opposed things, perhaps even in being essentially identical with them, perhaps. But who wishes to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? For that investigation, one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have other tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those hitherto prevalent, philosophers of the dangerous perhaps in every sense of the term. And to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers beginning to appear. This is so nice. What a great point. He's saying that Christians will say that he doesn't mention Christians really, but he does say metaphysicians of all ages, etc. But we kind of, in retrospect, know he was specifically mainly talking about Christians. But anyway, Christian phobia is not the point here. The point is that those sorts of people exist in all religions, but he's pointing out that they believe that good things cannot have any distant, remote relation with bad things. And he's pointing out that what constitutes the value of those good and respected things consists precisely in their being insidiously related, knotted, and crocheted to these evil and apparently opposed things, because, after all, contrast is the mother of clarity. Without comparison, you cannot have any understanding of anything. Hence, comparative sociology, comparative history. That is the way to go. And just like, again, Thomas Sowell also says, if you declare some country to be bad or good, it has to be in relationship to some other country. An economic system has to be compared to another economic system. You can't just say, yeah, the alternative does not exist anywhere, but this is bad, let's change it. Then you are asking for cosmic justice, because you are looking for an imaginary perfect place. So in the same way, he's talking about the contrast here. The good things, therefore, are inherently related to the bad things because they are good in contrast to the bad. Yeah, the perhaps. Good question, Yon. Yeah, we are now getting to the perhaps. Perhaps even now, this is the first time he talks about perhaps here. So all the good things are insidiously related, knotted, and crocheted to these evil and apparently opposed things. apparently oppose, because he doesn't agree that they are opposed. He's saying the Christians would say that they are opposed, perhaps even in being essentially identical with them. This is the importance of the perhaps. What if they are identical? What if they are just two sides of the same coin? And that is a dangerous perhaps, isn't it? But who wishes to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses that you end up saying that the good is inherently tied up to the evil? For that investigation, one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have other tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those hitherto prevalent, philosophers of the dangerous perhaps, in every sense of the term. And to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers beginning to appear. Third aphorism. Having kept a sharp eye on philosophers, and having read between their lines long enough, I now say to myself that the greater part of conscious thinking must be counted among the instinctive functions. And it is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. Jordan Peterson had once said this, that I usually underline some passages here and there in all books. I make a little note, but I can't do that with this book because I'll have to underline each and every line. The book will become double thick because of so many stickers I put in, because every line is so incredible and profound. Listen to this line. The greater part of conscious thinking must be counted among the instinctive functions. Okay? And it is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. One has here to learn anew, as one learned anew about heredity and innateness. As little as the act of birth comes into consideration in the whole process and procedure of heredity, just as little is being conscious opposed to the instinctive in any decisive sense. As little as the act of birth comes into consideration in the whole process and procedure of heredity, just as little is being conscious together, okay, quote unquote, being conscious opposed to the instinctive in any decisive sense. The greater part of the conscious thinking of a philosopher is secretly influenced by his instincts and forced into definite channels. And behind all logic and its seeming sovereignty of movement, there are valuations, or to speak more plainly, physiological demands for the maintenance of a definite mode of life. For example, that the certain is worth more than the uncertain, that illusion is less valuable than truth, quote unquote truth. Such valuations, in spite of their regulative importance for us, might notwithstanding be only superficial valuations, special kind of niaisery, such as may be necessary for the maintenance of beings such as ourselves, because we are imperfect, lowly beings. Supposing in effect that man is not just the quote unquote measure of things. Next aphorism. The falseness of an option is not for us any objection to it. It is here perhaps that our new language sounds most strangely. The question is, how far an opinion is life furthering, life preserving, species preserving, perhaps species rearing, and we are fundamentally inclined to maintain that the falsest opinions are the most indispensable to us. Why? We'll get to know. Why are the falsest opinions the most indispensable to us? That without a recognition of logical fictions, without a comparison of reality with the purely imagined world of the absolute and immutable, without a constant counterfeiting of the world by means of numbers, man could not live. Because numbers and representations, a low resolution representation, description of the real world, without that we cannot survive. A gist of things, because otherwise we won't be able to process all this information. Logical fictions without a comparison of reality with the purely imagined world of the absolute and immutable, without a constant counterfeiting of the world by means of numbers, man could not live. That the renunciation of false opinions would be a renunciation of life. Only truth, raw, bare bones truth, does not matter. a negation of life and a renunciation of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that is certainly to impugn the traditional ideas of value in a dangerous manner, and a philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby alone placed itself beyond good and evil. A philosophy which tries to do that is beyond good and evil, because we are not talking about what is good and what is evil. We are talking about a world where, in reality, in the end, broadly speaking, the untruths matter just as much as the truth, in fact, more. Yeah, Sudeep. Here, this guy is bringing Platonic form dogma, I feel. Well, it's just the fourth aphorism. He has about, what, thousands of aphorisms. How many aphorisms in the entire book? Yeah. By the 295th aphorism, you might have a different opinion. That which causes philosophers to be regarded half distrustfully and half mockingly is not the often repeated discovery how innocent they are, how often and easily they make mistakes and lose their way, in short, how childish and childlike they are, but that there is not enough honest dealing with them, whereas they all raise a loud and virtuous outcry when the problem of truthfulness is even hinted at in the remotest manner. They all pose as though their real opinions had been discovered and attained through the self-evolving of a cold, pure, divinely indifferent dialectic, in contrast to all sorts of mystics who, fairer and foolisher, talk of inspiration. Kya trolling hai? He's saying, as if those philosophers are really any better than the mystics or religious men, okay, who say that we got it from inspiration, divine inspiration. And they say that, yeah, we just self-evolved into a cold, pure, divinely indifferent dialectic. ऐसे ही पहुंच गए. Whereas, in fact, a prejudiced proposition, idea, or quote-unquote suggestion, which is generally their heart's desire, abstracted and refined, is defended by them with arguments sought after the event. Remember what René Girard said? That your decisions, your choices are just choices. They don't have much reasoning and logic to them. Reason is your lawyer or your PR firm later coming in to justify your base instincts. Trolling Kant. They are all advocates who do not wish to be regarded as such, generally astute defenders also of their prejudices, which they dub truths. They are not truths. And very far from having the conscience which bravely admits this to itself, very far from having the good taste of the courage which goes so far as to let this be understood, perhaps to warn friend or foe, or in cheerful confidence and self-ridicule. The spectacle of tartuffery of old Kant, Immanuel Kant, equally stiff and decent, which and with which he entices us into dialectic byways that lead to his quote-unquote categorical imperative, more correctly mislead us to his categorical imperative, makes us fastidious ones smile. We who find no small amusement in spying out the subtle tricks of old moralists and ethical preachers. इश क्या थॉट है, क्या भाषा है, क्या एग्जीक्यूशन है, क्या आर्टिकुलेशन है. So let's read this sentence once more just for fun. The spectacle of the tartuffery of old Kant, equally stiff and decent, with which he entices us into the dialectic byways that lead, more correctly mislead, to his categorical imperative, makes us fastidious ones smile. We who find no small amusement in spying out the subtle tricks of old moralists and ethical preachers. Or still more so, the hocus pocus in mathematical form, by means of which Spinoza has, as it were, clad his philosophy in mail and mask. In fact, the quote-unquote love of his wisdom, to translate the term fairly and squarely, in order thereby to strike terror at once into the heart of the assailant, who should dare to cast a glance on that invincible maiden, that Pallas Athene? How much of personal timidity and vulnerability does this masquerade of a sickly recluse betray? Next aphorism. It has gradually become clear to me what every great philosophy up till now has consisted of, namely, the confession of its originator, and a species of involuntary and unconscious autobiography. So well said. Philosophers, he's saying philosophers are in the end just writing their own biographies. ये मेरे जिंदगी में ये हुआ. At least not selling it that way because they are not being truthful. They are depending on untruth, and in the end writing a biography and not even admitting that it's a biography. It's an autobiography. It has gradually become clear to me what every great philosophy up till now has consisted of, namely, the confession of its originator, and a species of involuntary and unconscious autobiography, and moreover, that the moral or immoral purpose in every philosophy has constituted the true vital has constituted the true vital germ out of which the entire plant has always grown. Moral or immoral purpose in every philosophy has constituted the true vital germ out of which the entire plant has always grown. Indeed, to understand how the abstrusest metaphysical assertions of a philosopher have been arrived at, it is always well and wise to first ask oneself, what morality do they or does he aim at? Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy. Holy shit. But that another impulse, here as elsewhere, has only made use of knowledge and mistaken knowledge as an instrument. Fuck. But whoever considers the fundamental impulses of man with a view to determining how far they may have here acted as inspiring genii or as demons and kobolds will find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another, and that each one of them would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence and the legitimate lord over all the other impulses. For every impulse is imperious, and as such attempts to philosophize. To be sure, in the case of scholars, in the case of really scientific men, it may be otherwise better, if you will. It may be otherwise better, if you will. There may really be such a thing as an quote-unquote impulse to knowledge, some kind of small independent clockwork, which when well wound up, works away industriously to that end, without the rest of the scholarly impulses taking any material part wherein. The actual quote-unquote interests of the scholar, therefore, are generally in quite another direction, in the family perhaps, or in money-making, or in politics. It is in fact almost indifferent at what point of, oh my god, listen to this line. It is in fact almost indifferent at what point of research his little machine is placed, and whether the hopeful young worker becomes a good philologist, a mushroom specialist, or a chemist. He is not characterized by becoming this or that. In the philosopher, on the contrary, there is absolutely nothing impersonal. And above all, his morality furnishes a decided and decisive testimony as to who he is. That is to say, in what order the deepest impulses of his nature stand to each other. So he's arguing, starting to make the case that everyone is in the end making up their own morals. Don't try to dogmatize and shove it down the throats of others, saying that that's the only moral thing. Okay, someday. Yeah, Shudip. Next aphorism. How malicious philosophers can be. I know of nothing more stinging than the joke Epicurus took the liberty of making on Plato and the Platonists. He called them Dionysiocolax. Dionysiocolax. In its original sense, and on the face of it, the word signifies flatterers of Dionysus. Consequently, Tyrance's accessories and lickspittles. Besides this, oh my god. So Epicurus called Plato and Platonists the tyrants' accessories and lickspittles. Besides this, however, it is as much as to say they are all actors. There is nothing genuine about them, because Dionysiocolax was a popular name for an actor. And the latter is really the malignant reproach. And the latter is really the malignant. Sudeep's good question is distracting me. I want to answer it. He's asking, no group influence, only individuals making up their own models? No, group plays a part, but the degree varies. More close the group, the lesser of this independence. But the point here is that the group impact on that individual is still hindering something. What is it hindering then? Hindering that individual's innate urge to make up his own models. So he's saying that just embrace it, or the fact that it in fact is an innate urge, which is only being hampered by the group's influence. And the latter is really the malignant reproach that Epicurus must cast upon Plato. He was annoyed by the grandiose manner, the mise en scène. How to pronounce this? I keep forgetting. Mise en scène, right? The mise en scène style of which Plato and his scholars were masters, of which Epicurus was not a master. He, the old school teacher of Samos, who sat concealed in his little garden at Athens and wrote 300 books, perhaps out of rage and ambitious envy of Plato, who knows? Greece took 100 years to find out who the garden god Epicurus really was. Did she ever find out? My God. Oh my God, what a great question. Greece took 100 years to find out who the garden god Epicurus really was, but then he adds, did Greece really ever find out? Sudeep is saying, no, I would say innate urge to join a different group, even those who are strict individualists are going into one group. Elaborate a little more. Firstly, no one is inherently a strict individualist, because there also we must take the group into account, because it's the group. Everyone is in the end part of a group, but it's the group which is allowing him to be that strict individualist. So you could call that a group influence, no? That the entire group promotes that strict individualism, and they make up their own models. Acha, you meant that only. A small aphorism here. There is a point in every philosophy at which the quote-unquote conviction of the philosopher appears on the scene. Or to put it in the words of an ancient mystery, adventavit asinus pulcher et fortissimus. इसका ट्रांसलेशन नहीं दिया है, हमको ढूंढना पड़ेगा गूगल में. रुको. Adventavit. एक बार में ही आ गया, क्योंकि नीचे इतना पॉपुलर है. Is a Latin phrase that translates to the ass arrives beautiful and most brave. It is famously used by Nietzsche in his book Beyond Good and Evil to signify a point in a philosopher's work where their underlying convictions and prejudices are revealed. Oh my God. So the underlying convictions and prejudices of a philosopher is being compared to a donkey. It is in the end a donkey, but it's just has decked itself up, put on a lot of makeup, and is trying to act brave. The phrase itself is a quotation from a medieval Christian celebration called the Feast of the Ass, which honored the donkey that carried Mary and the infant Jesus to Egypt. Nietzsche's usage. He uses the phrase to suggest that every philosophy, no matter how complex, is built upon certain pre-existing assumptions that eventually come to the surface. The ass can be interpreted as the irrational and deeply held beliefs that support the philosopher's arguments. Nice. Medieval origins. The quote comes from the not interested. Nietzsche's contrast. By using this medieval quote, Nietzsche creates a contrast, implying that what appears to be a noble and brave arrival is actually the revelation of personal rather than objective biases. Next aphorism. You desire to live, quote unquote, according to nature. Oh, you noble Stoics. What fraud of words. Imagine to yourselves a being like nature, boundlessly extravagant, boundlessly indifferent. Why won't we have to spend 30-40 minutes on each line or paragraph? What a brilliant thing to observe. You want to live according to nature. You think you are a nature loving man. You want to live close to nature. Huh? Are you then boundlessly extravagant like nature? You may be, but are you boundlessly indifferent like nature? Sannyasis, I guess. Without purpose or consideration, are you like that? Without pity or justice, are you like that? At once fruitful and barren and uncertain. Imagine to yourselves indifference as a power. How could you live in accordance with such indifference? To live is not that just endeavoring to be is not that just endeavoring to be otherwise than this nature? Is not living valuing, preferring, being unjust, being limited, endeavoring to be different? See, this is why Viveka is such a misunderstood concept. I don't know about other Indian languages, but in Bengali, for some fucking reason, Vivek, the word Vivek, is considered to be conscience, whereas it's not. Viveka is discrimination. The intellect to discriminate properly. Discriminate here meaning to prefer something over another thing, to make choices. That's Vivek. Sannyasis do have a purpose. I see. They do. I did not know that. I thought they are supposed to simply retire from society. If yes, then yeah, they are also not living according to nature. What brilliant 5-6 lines. Oh, you so yeah, he's trolling Stoics here. Kya Stoic banega re tu? Oh, you noble Stoics, what fraud of words. Imagine to yourselves a being like nature, boundlessly extravagant, boundlessly indifferent, without purpose or consideration, without pity or justice, at once fruitful and barren and uncertain. Imagine to yourselves indifference as a power. How could you live in accordance with such indifference? To live, isn't that just endeavoring to be otherwise, meaning different from this nature? If you are saying you want to live, or you are living, aren't you simply trying to get away from nature? Inherently. To live isn't that just endeavoring to be otherwise than this nature? Isn't living, valuing, preferring, being unjust, being limited, endeavoring to be different? And granted that your imperative, quote unquote, living according to nature means actually the same as living according to life, how could you do differently? He's trolling Sanatan economists as well. Why should you make a principle out of what you yourselves are and must be? In reality, however, it is quite otherwise with you. While you pretend to read with rapture the canon of your law in nature, you want something quite the contrary. You extraordinary stage players and self-deluders. In your pride, you wish to dictate your morals and ideals to nature herself, and to incorporate them therein. You insist that it shall be nature according to the Stoa, and would like everything to be made after your own image as a vast eternal glorification and generalism of Stoicism. With all your love for truth, you have forced yourself so long, so persistently, and with such hypnotic rigidity to see nature falsely, that is to say, stoically, that you are falsely or stoically equate kar diya. Okay. With all your love for truth, you have forced yourself so long, so persistently, and with such hypnotic rigidity to see nature falsely, that is to say, stoically, that you are no longer able to see it otherwise. And to crown all, some unfathomable superciliousness gives you the bedlamite hope that because you are able to tyrannize over yourselves, stoicism is self-tyranny, nature will also allow herself to be tyrannized over. Is not the stoic a part of the nature, a part of nature? But this is an old and everlasting story, which is what happened in the old times with the Stoics still happens today. As soon as ever a philosophy begins to believe in itself, it always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is this tyrannical impulse itself, the most spiritual will to power. the will to creation of the world, the will to causa prima. He's not saying, I'm different from you guys. He's not saying that all you philosophers are idiots, you guys just sell your impulses as some different objective philosophy. I do the same thing, but I'm admitting that I'm doing that thing. For the first time now, we hear the phrase will to power, which is going to be the point of this book. It always creates the world in its own image, every philosophy. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is this tyrannical impulse itself, the most spiritual will to power, the will to creation of the world, the will to the causa prima. Next aphorism. The eagerness and subtlety, I should even say craftiness, with which the problem of the quote unquote real and apparent world is dealt with at present throughout Europe, furnishes food for thought and attention. And he who hears only a quote unquote will to truth in the background and nothing else cannot certainly boast of the sharpest ears. In rare and isolated cases, it may really have happened that such a will to truth, a certain such a will to truth, a certain extravagant and adventurous pluck, a metaphysician's ambition of the forlorn hope, has participated therein. That which in the end always prefers a handful of certainty to a whole cartload of beautiful possibilities. Okay, it has perhaps happened that sometimes people have actually been bothered about the will to truth, but he's saying mostly people are at that point in Europe are bothered about the real and apparent world, and he who hears only will to truth in them, he who thinks that, oh, he's just trying to get to the truth, is not, he does not have the sharpest ears, is not looking hard enough. So in rare and isolated cases, it may really have happened that such a will to truth, a certain extravagant and adventurous pluck, a metaphysician's ambition of the forlorn hope, has participated therein. That which in the end always prefers certainty instead of a whole cartload of beautiful possibilities. Hence, people will always prefer socialism over libertarianism, free markets in a democracy. People want certainty instead of a cartload of beautiful possibilities. There may even be puritanical fanatics of conscience who prefer to put their last trust in a sure nothing rather than in an uncertain something. But that is nihilism and the sign of a despairing, mortally wearied soul, notwithstanding the courageous bearing such a virtue may display. Holy shit. There may even be puritanical fanatics of conscience who prefer to put their last trust in a sure nothing rather than in an uncertain something. He's talking about Bengal now. But that is nihilism and the sign of a despairing, mortally wearied soul, notwithstanding the courageous bearing such a virtue may display. Okay? They may say that, see, no, I'm so courageous. It seems, however, to be otherwise with stronger and livelier thinkers who are still eager for life, in that they side against appearance and speak superciliously of perspective, in that they rank the credibility of their own bodies about as low as the credibility of the ocular evidence that the earth stands still, and thus apparently allowing with complacency their securest possession to escape. Who knows if they are not really trying to win back something which was formerly an even securer position, something of the old domain of the faith of former times, perhaps the immortal soul, perhaps the old god, in short, ideas by which they could live better, that is to say, more vigorously and more joyously than by quote-unquote modern ideas. For what does one at present believe in more firmly than in one's own body? Oh, what a line, what a paragraph here. Who is he talking about now? He's talking about people like him, of course. Hopefully about some people like us. थोड़ा self insert and projection करते हैं चलो. So he's saying, line कहाँ शुरू हुआ? Yeah. It seems, however, to be otherwise with stronger and livelier thinkers who are still eager for life, in that they side against appearance and speak superciliously of perspective, in that they rank the credibility of their own bodies about as low as the credibility of the ocular evidence that the earth stands still, and thus apparently allowing with complacency their securest possession to escape. Oh my God, they are allowing with complacency, with full mental security, they are allowing their most securest of possessions to escape. Who knows if they are not really trying to win back something which was formerly an even securer possession? And what is that formerly securer possession? Something of the old domain of the faith of former times, perhaps the immortal soul, perhaps the old god. In short, ideas by which, oh my god, the old god ka ek aur interpretation suno. The old god, in short, ideas by which they could live better. Live better ka explanation kya hai? What does living better entail? Living better means living more vigorously and more joyously than by modern ideas. There is distrust of these modern ideas in this mode of looking at things, a disbelief in all that has been constructed yesterday and today. There is perhaps some slight admixture of satiety and scorn, which can no longer endure the bric-a-brac of ideas of the most varied origin, such as so-called positivism at present throws on the market, a disgust of the more refined taste at the village fair motleyiness and patchiness of all these reality philosophasters, in whom there is nothing either new or true except this motleyiness. Therein it seems to me that we should agree with those skeptical anti-realists and knowledge microscopists of the present day. Their instinct, which repels them from modern reality, is unrefuted. What do their retrograde bypaths concern us? The main thing about them is not that they wish to go quote unquote back, but that they wish to get away therefrom. A little more strength, swing, courage, and artistic power, and they would be off and not back. Oof. No need to consistently be a progressive for progressive's sake. No need to go back to an imaginary golden era. Just get away from this straight line altogether. Next aphorism. It seems to me that there is everywhere an attempt at present to divert attention from the actual influence which Kant exercised on German philosophy, and especially to ignore prudently the value which he set upon himself. Kant was first and foremost proud of his table of categories, which, with it in his hand, he said, quote, "This is the most difficult thing that could ever be undertaken on behalf of metaphysics," end quote. Let us only understand this, quote unquote, could be. Because Kant said this is the most difficult thing that could ever be undertaken. So Nietzsche is now bothered about the could be. He was proud of having discovered a new faculty in man, the faculty of synthetic judgment a priori. Granting that, wait. Hmm. He was proud of having discovered a new faculty in man, the faculty of synthetic judgment a priori. Granting that he deceived himself in this matter, the development and rapid flourishing of German philosophy depended nevertheless on. So, we spent about 1.5 hours discussing a German sociologist. Now we are reading a German philosopher. Holy shit! Um, we are very much mentally in Germany today. This is the most, sorry. Granting that he deceived himself in this matter, the development and rapid flourishing of German philosophy depended nevertheless on his pride and on the eager rivalry of the younger generation to discover, if possible, something at all, events, uh, new faculties of which to be still prouder. But let us reflect for a moment. It is high time to do so. How are synthetic judgments a priori possible? Kant asks himself. And what is really his answer? By means of a means. This is his quote. Meaning faculty. By means of a means. The faculty. But unfortunately, not in 5 words, but so circumstantially, imposingly, and with such display of German profundity and verbal flourishes that one altogether loses sight of the comical nisere almande involved in such an answer. और जर्मन वर्ड या फिर लैटिन वर्ड ढूंढना पड़ेगा. प्रोनाउंसिएशन भी देख लेते हैं. प्रोनाउंसिएशन अच्छा नाइविटी प्रोनाउंसिएशन दिया नहीं है ना. नियाजरी आलमंड. अच्छा नियाजरी आलमंड. When will Rebecca Barsev come back on the program? After governments change in the state I live in, the synthetic analytic priori posterior distinctions are pure nonsense. Kant asks himself, and what is really his answer? By means of a means, faculty, but unfortunately not in 5 words, but so circumstantially, imposingly, and with such display of German profundity and verbal flourishes that one altogether loses the sight of the comical naivety involved in such an answer. Ish. People were beside themselves with delight over this new faculty, and the jubilation reached its climax when Kant further discovered a moral faculty in man. For at that time, Germans were still moral, not yet dabbling in the quote-unquote politics of hard fact. Then came the honeymoon of German philosophy. All the young theologians of the Tübingen Institution went immediately into the groves, all seeking for quote-unquote faculties. And what did they not find in that innocent, rich, and still youthful period of the German spirit, to which Romanticism, the malicious fairy, piped and sang, when one could not yet distinguish between finding and inventing? Finding is not the same as inventing. Thank you. Above all, a faculty for the quote-unquote transcendental. Schelling christened it intellectual intuition, and thereby gratified the most earnest longings of the naturally pious inclined Germans. One can do no greater wrong to the whole of this exuberant and eccentric movement, which was really youthfulness, notwithstanding that it disguised itself so boldly in hoary and senile conceptions, than to take it seriously or even treat it with moral indignation. Enough, however, the world grew older and the dream vanished. A time came when people rubbed their foreheads, and they still rub them today. People had been dreaming, and first and foremost, old Kant. By means of a means, he had said, or at least meant to say. But is that an answer, an explanation, or is it not rather merely a repetition of the question? How does opium induce sleep? By means of a means, namely the virtus dormitiva, replies the doctor in Molière. बहुत लैटिन और जर्मन वर्ड्स और फ्रेजेस हैं अभी, रुको थोड़ा गूगल करते हैं. Forgot all this. जब भी पढ़ता हूँ फिर से गूगल करना पड़ता है. Sleep inducing property. Latin phrase from Moliere's 1673 play The Imaginary Invalid. It is used to criticize a vacuous or tautological explanation that defines a phenomenon by a supposed property of the thing itself, with the most famous example being the explanation that opium causes sleep because it has a virtus dormitiva. Ish. In philosophy and science, virtus dormitiva is used as a pejorative term for a circular argument or a pseudo explanation that lacks real substance. It is a classic example of explaining an effect by simply naming the supposed cause, which offers no true insight into the underlying mechanism. How does opium induce sleep? By means of a means. But such replies belong to the realm of comedy, and it is high time to replace the Kantian question that of how are synthetic judgments a priori possible by another question: why is belief in such judgments necessary? In effect, it is high time that we should understand that such judgments must be believed to be true. For the sake of the preservation of creatures like ourselves, though they still might naturally be false judgments. Or more plainly spoken and roughly and readily, synthetic judgments a priori should not be quote unquote be possible at all. We have no right to them. In our mouths, they are nothing but false judgments. Only, of course, the belief in their truth is necessary, as plausible belief and ocular evidence belonging to the perspective view of life. And finally, to call to mind the enormous influence which quote unquote German philosophy, I hope you understand its right to inverted commas goose feet, has exercised throughout the whole of Europe. There is no doubt that a certain virtus dormitiva had a share in it. Circular reasonings. He's saying the reason behind this popularity of this quote unquote German philosophy, a bit of that popularity has happened because of this circular reasoning. No, I have not read Ananda Kumaraswamy. I don't intend to read S.N. Balagangadhara. Yeah, let's check Shudip's comment. Why a priori is nonsense? Why priori is nonsense? Because priori propositions are just tautologies which technically, though proposition aren't really. From Nyaya POV, a proposition as in a premise always have the lakshana of doubt. That is, proposition must be doubtable in principle, which posteriori sentences do, but not priori. A priori mean. I think Nietzsche would agree. Yeah. I have read large chunks of S.N. Balagangadhara's work, though, in the book called Majoritarian Myth. There's a huge chunk of that book in that book by Dr. Kaushik Gangapathy, because he's a huge fan of S.N. Balagangadhara, and I'm a big fan of his work in Majoritarian Myth. The virtues and mistakes. Okay, let's read this trolling line once again. And finally, to call to mind the enormous influence which quote unquote German philosophy, I hope you understand its right to inverted commas, has exercised throughout the whole of Europe. There is no doubt that a certain virtus dormitiva had a share in it. Thanks to German philosophy, it was a delight to the noble idlers, the virtuous, the mystics, the artistes, the three-fourths Christians, and the political obscurantists of all nations to find an antidote to the still overwhelming sensualism which overflowed from the last century into this, in short, sensus assupire. Let's check out this meaning again. To put the senses to sleep. Brilliant. It's a tautological explanation. The reason opium makes people sleep is because it has a dormitive sleep-inducing power, which is defined as the ability to make people sleep. Yeah, it sounds like all Hindutva 1.0 talking points. है क्योंकि है भोसरी के मान लो. Shit. He's saying that this kind of thinking is behind German philosophy's, quote-unquote German philosophy's popularity. To find an antidote to the still overwhelming sensualism which overflowed from the last century into this, in short, है तो है. ये माइक काम करता है क्योंकि इसमें माइक काम करने वाला एक प्रॉपर्टी है. इसलिए ये माइक काम करता है. Next aphorism. As regards materialistic atomism, it is one of the best refuted theories that have been advanced, and in Europe there is now perhaps no one in the learned world so unscholarly as to attach serious signification to it, except for convenient everyday use, as an abbreviation of the means of expression. Thanks chiefly to the Pole Boscovich, he and the Pole Copernicus have hitherto been the greatest and most successful opponents of ocular evidence. For while Copernicus has persuaded us to believe, contrary to all the senses, that the earth does not stand fast, Boscovich has taught us to abjure the belief in the last thing that stood fast of the earth, the belief in substance, in matter, in the earth residuum and particle atom. It is the greatest triumph over the senses that has hitherto been gained on earth. One must, however, go still further and also declare war, relentless war to the knife against the quote-unquote atomistic requirements, which still lead a dangerous afterlife in places where no one suspects them, like the more celebrated quote-unquote metaphysical requirements. One must also, above all, give the finishing stroke to that other and more portentous atomism which Christianity has taught best and longest, the soul atomism. Let it be permitted to designate by this expression the belief which regards the soul as something indestructible, eternal, indivisible, as a monad, as an atomon. This belief ought to be expelled from science. Between ourselves, it is not at all necessary to get rid of the soul thereby. Okay? Between ourselves, it is not at all necessary to get rid of the quote-unquote soul thereby, and thus renounce one of the oldest and most venerated hypotheses, as happens frequently to the clumsiness of naturalists, who can hardly touch on the soul without immediately losing it. But the way is open for new acceptations and refinements of the soul hypothesis, and such conceptions as quote-unquote mortal soul and soul of subjective multiplicity and soul as social structure of the instincts and passions want henceforth to have legitimate rights in science. In that, new psychologist is about to put an end to the superstitions which have hitherto flourished with almost tropical luxuriance around the idea of the soul. He is really, as it were, thrusting himself into a new desert and a new distrust. It is possible that the older psychologists had a merrier and more comfortable time of it. Eventually, however, he finds that precisely thereby he is also condemned to invent, and who knows, perhaps to discover the new. Next aphorism. Psychologists should bethink themselves before putting down the instinct of self-preservation as the cardinal instinct of an organic being. A living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent results thereof. In short, here as everywhere else, let us beware of superfluous teleological principles, one of which is the instinct of self-preservation. We owe it to Spinoza's inconsistency. It is thus, in effect, that method ordains, which must be essentially economy of principles. This was a brilliant and one-sentence aphorism. Next aphorism. It is perhaps just dawning on, but how much can we really underline, guys? This was so awesome. Just for fun's sake, let's read this aphorism once more. Psychologists should bethink themselves before putting down the instinct of self-preservation as the cardinal instinct of an organic being. A living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent results thereof of will to power. In short, here as everywhere else, let us beware of superfluous teleological principles, one of which is the instinct of self-preservation. We owe it to Spinoza's inconsistency. It is thus, in effect, the method ordains, which must be essentially economy of principles. Next aphorism. It is perhaps just dawning on five or six minds that natural philosophy is only a word exposition and word arrangement, according to us, if I may say so, and not a world explanation. Not world. Excuse me. It is perhaps just dawning on five or six minds that natural philosophy is only a world exposition and world arrangement, according to us, if I may say so. Nietzsche is saying, if according to us. So he's building a team. And not a world explanation. Natural philosophy is not a world explanation. It's world exposition and world arrangement. But insofar as it is based on belief in the senses, it is regarded as more, and for a long time to come must be regarded as more, namely as an explanation. It has eyes and fingers of its own. It has ocular evidence and palpableness of its own. This operates fascinatingly, persuasively, and convincingly upon an age with fundamentally plebeian tastes. In fact, it follows instinctively the canon of truth of eternal popular sensualism. What is clear? What is explained? What is quote-unquote explained? Only that which can be seen and felt. One must pursue every problem thus far. Obviously, however, the charm of the Platonic mode of thought, which was an aristocratic mode, consisted precisely in resistance to obvious sense evidence. Perhaps among men who enjoyed even stronger and more fastidious senses than our contemporaries, okay? Perhaps among men who enjoyed even stronger and more fastidious senses than our contemporaries, but who knew how to find a higher triumph in remaining masters of them. Wow. I love this sentence. He's not saying that. He is saying that people say this, but that's not what it is. What is clear, what is explained? Only that which can be seen and felt. One must pursue every problem thus far. Obviously, however, the charm of the Platonic mode of thought, which was an aristocratic mode, consistently precise in resistance to obvious sense evidence, perhaps among men who enjoyed even stronger and more fastidious senses than our contemporaries, but they knew how to find a higher triumph in remaining masters of those senses. And this by means of pale, cold, grey conceptual networks which they threw over the motley whirl of the senses, the mob of the senses, as Plato said. In this overcoming of the world and interpreting of the world in the manner of Plato, there was an enjoyment different from that which the physicists of today offer us. And likewise, the Darwinists and anti-teleologists among the physiological workers, with their principle of the quote-unquote smallest possible effort and the greatest possible blunder, where there is nothing more to see, quote-unquote, because he's quoting other people now, where there is nothing more to see or to grasp, there is also nothing more for men to do. Now he is speaking. That is certainly an imperative different from the Platonic one, but it may notwithstanding be the right imperative for a hardy, laborious race of machinists and bridge builders of the future who have nothing but rough work to perform. So it's only for them. Next aphorism. To study physiology with a clear conscience, one must insist on the fact that the sense organs are not phenomena in the sense of the idealistic philosophy. As such, they certainly could not be causes. Sensualism, therefore, at least as regulative hypothesis, if not as heuristic principle. What? And others say even that the external world is the work of our organs. But then our body as a part of this external world would be the work of our organs. but then our organs themselves would be the work of our organs. It seems to me that this is a complete reductio ad absurdum. If the conception causa sui is something fundamentally absurd, consequently, the external world is not the work of our organs. End of this aphorism. Next aphorism. There are still harmless self-observers who believe that there are immediate certainties. For instance, I think, or as the superstition of Schopenhauer puts it, I will, as though cognition here got hold of its object purely and simply as the quote-unquote thing in itself, without any falsification taking place either on the part of the subject or the object. I would repeat it, however, 100 times that immediate certainty as well as absolute knowledge and the thing in itself involve a contradictio in adjecto. We really ought to free ourselves from the misleading significance of words. The people on their part may think that cognition is knowing all about things, but the philosopher must say to himself, when I analyze the process that is expressed in the sentence, I think. When I analyze the process that is expressed in the sentence, I think, I find a whole series of daring assertions. The argumentative, this was so well explained by Jordan Peterson. When I analyze the process, he is advising philosophers to ask themselves, say to themselves that when I analyze the process that is expressed in the sentence, I think, I find a whole series of daring assertions, the argumentative proof of which would be difficult, perhaps impossible. For instance, that it is I who think, that there must necessarily be something that thinks, that thinking is an activity and operation on the part of a being who is thought of as a cause, that there is an ego, and finally, that it is already determined what it is to be designated by thinking, that I know what thinking is. What do you mean by thinking? What do you mean by I think? For if I had not already decided within myself what it is, by what standard could I determine whether that which is just happening is not perhaps willing or feeling? So, what do you mean then when you say you are thinking? In short, the assertion I think assumes that I compare my state at the present moment with other states of myself, which I know, in order to determine what it is. Yeah, comparatively again. This is a beautiful line to underline. When I say I think, I mean that at this point, I'm not feeling or making things up randomly. I'm trying to get to knowledge, maybe. I feel like I'm picking up dumbbells with my brains. In short, the assertion I think assumes that I compare my state at the present moment with other states of myself, which I know, in order to determine what it is, on account of this retrospective connection with further quote-unquote knowledge. It has, at any rate, no immediate certainty for me. In place of the immediate certainty in which the people may believe in the special case, the philosopher thus finds a series of metaphysical questions presented to him, veritable conscience questions of the intellect, to wit, like, whence did I get the notion of thinking? Why do I believe in cause and effect? What gives me the right to speak of an ego, and even of an ego as cause? And finally, of an ego as cause of thought. He who ventures to answer these metaphysical questions at once by an appeal to a sort of intuitive perception, like the person who says, I think and know that this at least is true, actual, and certain, will encounter smile and two notes of interrogation in a philosopher nowadays. Sir, the philosopher will perhaps give him to understand, it is improbable that you are not mistaken. It is improbable that you are not mistaken, but why should it be the truth? Next aphorism. With regard to the superstitions of logicians, I shall never tire of emphasizing a small terse fact, which is unwillingly recognized by these credulous minds, namely, that a thought comes when it wishes and not when I wish. Yeah. So that it is a perversion of the facts of the case to say that the object I is a condition of the predicate think. So true. One thinks, but that this one is precisely the famous old ego is, to put it mildly, only a supposition, an assertion, and assuredly not an immediate certainty. After all, one has even gone too far with this one thinks, even the one contains an interpretation of the process and does not belong to the process itself. One infers here according to the usual grammatical formula. To think is an activity. Every activity requires an agency that is active. Consequently, ... It was pretty much on the same lines that the older atomism sought, besides the operating power, the material particle wherein it resides, and out of which it operates, the atom. More rigorous minds, however, learnt at last to get along without this earth residuum, and perhaps someday we shall accustom ourselves, even from the logician's point of view, to get along without the little one to which the worthy old ego has refined itself. Yes. End of this aphorism. Next aphorism. It is certainly not the least charm of a theory that it is refutable. It is precisely thereby that it attracts the more subtle minds. It is certainly not the least charm of a theory that it is refutable. It is precisely thereby that it attracts the more subtle minds. It seems that the 100 times refuted theory of the free will owes its persistence to this charm alone, that it's refutable. Holy shit. What an idea. What a thought. That the popularity depends on it being refutable. Someone is always appearing who feeds himself strong enough to refute it. Next aphorism. 1 hour 26 minutes of Nietzsche straight. 24 pages. Yes. Thank God I had read it so many times before. I've never read Osho Seeker. I've heard some of his small bites of his quotes and lectures here and there. The people are retarded. Philosophers are accustomed to speak of the will as though it were the best known thing. No, I do need a cigarette now, unfortunately. Smoking is injurious to health, guys. Smoking causes cancer. Do not smoke. Nietzsche padte ek cigarette na piye to how will my brain get some rest? This is the rest period between the reps that my brain is doing. I'll be checking out some comments until my cigarette finishes, and until then we'll check out some Nietzsche videos as well. Seeker. I don't know. I have no idea on this data. There's not much even data on this. Not even the stats are not really believable. सिगरेट ब्रेक में नीचे ही सुनेंगे और
Friedrich Nietzsche, that philosophical sledgehammer of the 19th century, scrolling through modern social media. He sees tech billionaires quoting Marcus Aurelius between funding announcements. He watches as stoicism for success dominates bestseller lists and fitness influencers preach emotional detachment as the path to six-pack abs. His reaction? Not scholarly interest or grudging respect, but absolute contempt. Stoicism is undeniably having its cultural moment, from Silicon Valley executives to celebrity podcasters, from Reddit forums to airport bookstores. Everyone seems to be carrying pocket editions of Seneca and preaching the gospel of focusing only on what you can control. This ancient Greco-Roman philosophy, with its emphasis on emotional restraint and acceptance of fate, has found an eager audience in our anxious, uncertain world. But there's one intellectual giant who would have watched this Stoic revival with thunderous disdain: Friedrich Nietzsche. The German philosopher didn't just disagree with Stoicism, he considered it a profound betrayal of human nature, a philosophy of life denial disguised as wisdom, spiritual anesthesia masquerading as strength. Today, we're diving into this philosophical
Spiritual anesthesia.
masquerading as strength. Today, we're diving into this philosophical showdown between two titans of Western thought. And the stakes couldn't be higher. They're fighting over nothing less than how we should live our lives. The cornerstone of Stoic philosophy is living according to nature, harmonizing with what they perceived as the universe's rational design. For the Stoics, the cosmos operates according to divine reason, a perfectly ordered system where everything unfolds according to rational principles. This is why Marcus Aurelius could write in his Meditations that whatever happens to us is part of a greater plan, and our task is simply to accept it with grace. Nietzsche demolishes this premise with characteristic ferocity. In Beyond Good and Evil, he writes, "You desire to live according to nature? Oh, you noble Stoics, what deceptive words these are! Imagine a being like nature, wasteful beyond measure, indifferent beyond measure, without purpose and consideration, without mercy and justice. Imagine indifference itself as a power. How could you live according to this indifference?" For Nietzsche, the natural world isn't an ordered system, but an amoral, chaotic force, completely indifferent to human concepts of meaning or justice. Just look around. Tsunamis don't spare children. Cancer doesn't avoid the virtuous, and ecosystems thrive on constant brutal competition. Nature isn't rational or kind. It's powerful, creative, destructive, and utterly indifferent to our moral categories. Nietzsche accuses Stoics of profound intellectual dishonesty. They project their moral ideals onto the universe, then claim to derive those same ideals from nature's example. Your pride wants to impose
Genius. Yes. Creative destruction. Shiva the destroyer. When he destroys something to create something new, the things that get destroyed are in trouble. And along with that, what if there are collateral damages as well?
your morality, your ideal, on nature, and incorporate them in her, he charges. The Stoic contemplating the ordered cosmos is less like a scientist discovering natural laws and more like a child seeing faces in the clouds, finding only what they already put there. Stoicism's approach to emotions, the pursuit of apatheia and ataraxia, which is also known as freedom from disruptive passions and tranquility, represents for Nietzsche not psychological maturity, but a profound diminishment of human potential. In The Gay Science, he offers a visceral metaphor. The Stoic exercises himself in swallowing stones and worms, glass shards and scorpions, and not feeling any disgust. His stomach is supposed to become indifferent in the end to everything that the accidents of existence might pour into it. This image captures Nietzsche's central objection. Stoic emotional discipline isn't self-mastery, but self-mutilation, deliberately numbing oneself to life's full spectrum. Think about it. Is a person who feels nothing at the loss of a loved one stronger than someone who grieves deeply?
Oh,
Is someone who can't be moved by beauty, passion, or even righteous anger truly living a full human life? Stoicism, for Nietzsche, is philosophical Botox, dulling life's expressions while killing its vitality. The Stoics' pursuit of emotional safety is the philosophy of a caged animal, life reduced to a dull, tame existence under the illusion of strength. Consider how we approach difficult emotions today. When we feel anxiety, we're often told to just breathe or focus on what you can control. Classic Stoic advice. But what if that anxiety is pointing to something important we need to address?
Oh,
What if our
brilliant.
anger contains wisdom about injustice that
Yes.
deserves expression?
Yes.
The Stoic doesn't transcend suffering, he merely numbs himself to it, like a patient who chooses permanent anesthesia over the risky vitality of feeling alive. Behind this question,
Kamli, as a former fan of Stoicism myself, I absolutely get where you are coming from. So I would just say you must first attempt to be stoic. If emotions are only leading you down a path to bad results for your life and stuff in your personal life, but there is something beyond stoicism. That is Nietzsche. So first be stoic, see how it works out for you. After that, you should definitely try not being stoic. Interesting that Neon says we have all been stoics. It's an effective coping mechanism, and there's a video on YouTube from that guy of Chinese descent. He actually has a video titled "Why Nietzsche Thought Stoicism Was a Cope."
for invulnerability, Nietzsche detects not strength but fear. Specifically,
Oh yeah, I have not read Voltaire, Neon.
anesthesia over the risky vitality of feeling alive. Behind this quest for invulnerability, Nietzsche's expression. The Stoic doesn't transcend suffering, he merely numbs himself to it,
Yeah.
like a patient who chooses permanent anesthesia over the risky vitality of feeling alive. Behind this quest for
Stoicism, at the very least, will probably make you a very bad boyfriend.
invulnerability, Nietzsche detects not strength but fear. Specifically, fear of being deeply affected by life's unpredictability. True power lies not in remaining unmoved, but in having the courage to be moved deeply and still affirm existence. Is tranquility strength, or is surrender to fear? Modern Stoics would object to this characterization. Philosopher Massimo Pigliucci argues that apatheia isn't emotional numbness, but clarity, the ability to see situations without distortion. Donald Robertson contends that Stoicism is fundamentally proactive, not passive acceptance, but strategic focus on what matters.
Right.
The modern Stoic would say, we don't suppress emotions, but transform them. We don't resign ourselves to fate. We engage strategically with reality. We don't counsel indifference to injustice, but pragmatic action. After all, didn't Marcus Aurelius actively fulfill his duties as emperor rather than merely accepting his fate? Nevertheless, Nietzsche would remain deeply skeptical. While Stoics emphasize virtuous action, their fundamental premise, that virtue alone is sufficient for happiness, subtly undermines the creative tension necessary for transformation. When virtue
this is the
becomes
problem
its
with
own
stoicism.
reward,
You're going to be denying your creative tension, which is going to lead you to greater outcomes. Here to learn. Understood my point. Exactly, 100% here to learn. Seven is saying I had been to Vipassana. The whole stoicism thing is just Buddhism. I wonder who was there first. This might not be from Buddhism, maybe, who knows. The Jitendriya thing, Indriya Jaya, is very stoicism and very anti-Nietzschean.
that virtue alone is sufficient for happiness, subtly undermines the creative tension necessary for transformation.
No, seeker. Both aren't unaware of Chetana. Nietzsche is exactly harping upon Chetana. And he would argue that your Chetana, is inherently the will to power, not stoicism, not Indriya Jaya. He's actually acknowledging Chetana. Stoics are denying Chetana.
When virtue becomes its own reward, doesn't this discourage the risky, passionate engagement that drives revolutionary change? Consider climate activism. A strict Stoic might focus solely on personal virtue, reducing their carbon footprint, living simply, while accepting that the global climate crisis is largely beyond their control. A Nietzschean approach might embrace the creative anger that fuels movement building, a passionate commitment to transforming what seems unchangeable. Can a philosophy that
Stoicism was probably encouraged in old texts because it made more obedient and easy to handle citizens. So the state with capital S, would always encourage Stoicism. Here to learn. There's no difference, I think, between the two sentences. No, let's think about this harder. Let's try to put this in Nietzschean terms of anti-Stoicism. Let's think of the lotus leaf. The problem is the lotus leaf is not actually alive. Is it a dead leaf? Here to learn. If it is a live leaf, it probably wants to grow. Or even if it's a dead leaf, it's in water and it's not fatally attached, it's just floating around. There's no option to be fatally attached. A leaf cannot be fatally attached to water. So the premise is wrong here. Firstly, we don't know if the leaf is already dead or not. Secondly, the water cannot really damage the leaf. So there's no question of it being fatally attached to water anyway. Neon is saying, tahole, according to you, how does one move past Stoicism to consider these thoughts, these ideas of Nietzsche? We are not the body or mind. Eta Nietzsche mane. I don't think, I don't know. In this context, in this particular framing, he has spoken or not, I can't be sure.
Makes peace with circumstances ever truly challenge the status quo? The Stoic sage, that paragon of perfect rationality and virtue, immune to fortune's blows, represents for Nietzsche not an aspirational ideal, but a revealing fantasy. Even the Stoics acknowledged this figure was more theoretical than actual, a north star by which to navigate rather than a destination to reach. I mistrust all systematizers and avoid them, Nietzsche declares. The will to a system is a lack of integrity. The Stoic philosophical structure attempts to impose conceptual order on the messy reality.
The will to be part of a system, or to have a system to even exist. Therein lies that idea we were discussing from the book. The obsession with certain nothings over beautiful possible somethings, but uncertain somethings, discarding that for certain nothings or certain less beautiful things. If that's certain, people would prefer that over uncertain good things. Therefore, sheep mentality, herd mentality and stuff. Therefore, socialism, big state, sarkar ko karna chahiye, sarkar ko wo karna chahiye, etc. Those kinds of thoughts. Those thoughts are an extension of this kind of a thought.
Nietzsche declares, the will to a system is a lack of integrity. The Stoic philosophical structure attempts to impose conceptual order on the messy reality of human experience.
Yeah. Hence, free markets foster prosperity. No other system fosters prosperity. Only freedom fosters prosperity, because human existence is messy, chaotic, and complex. You can't nice it down into a perfect, nice structure, order, etc. Which is what he points out in the beginning of this video, which Nietzsche was saying, that you want to live according to nature. How? Life itself is is absolutely opposed to nature.
Nietzsche would see the Stoic sage not as an ideal, but as a corpse too disciplined to realize it has already died. A
Aha.
philosophical
Of
human experience. Nietzsche would see the Stoic sage not as an ideal, but as a corpse too disciplined to realize it has already died. A philosophical taxidermy project that preserves the form of human greatness while draining it of all vital fluids. The sage's bloodless perfection represents not humanity's highest achievement, but its ultimate betrayal. The sage's supposed achievement of perfect tranquility through perfect rationality fundamentally misunderstands what makes us human. Our contradictions, our passions, our capacity for both creation and destruction. What is the seal of liberation? Nietzsche asks. No longer being ashamed in front of oneself, where Stoicism seeks freedom through rational control over the self. Nietzsche finds liberation in honest self-acceptance, embracing even those aspects of ourselves that resist rational mastery.
this was a very important line.
Nietzsche finds liberation in honest self-acceptance, embracing even those aspects of ourselves that resist rational mastery.
Hirulan is saying lotus leaf is more slippery than others. If you take it out, it's not wet anymore, so it's not bothered by situations. It doesn't take water with it when time asks it to leave. But it's hard to compare it with a human situation, because it's the nature of that, it's the chetana of that leaf to not get wet, because it's physiologically created that way. So this can't be a good comparison. The premise again is weak. Overcoming turbulence due to, you can pretend to act like the leaf, but you are not the leaf. Your body is not slippery like the leaf. Overcoming turbulence due to sukh and dukh is for the sake that you take decisions with yogastha buddhi and do the job that you are supposed to do without fear or greed. But what is that job? Who gave you that job? Did the government give you the job, or you made a job for yourself? If you seeked out a job for yourself, it means you wanted to do something, but in particular you wanted to solve a particular problem, which is opposed to stoicism. Most important minority in the world is the individual, and thus his liberation is paramount. Yes, wawa, Nihon, wawa. Sigar, not sure.
What makes this critique particularly devastating is that it undermines Stoicism not just as incorrect, but as psychologically impossible. The Stoic conception of human nature resembles an architectural blueprint that ignores the actual materials available for construction. Nietzsche's alternative, the will to power and the Übermensch. Where Stoicism offers self-restraint, Nietzsche champions self-expansion. His concept of will to power isn't about dominating others, but the fundamental drive behind all life, the impulse toward growth, complexity, and...
Yeah, see? The fundamental drive, that phrase is not applicable for that leaf. That's the problem with that comparison.
His concept of will to power isn't about dominating others, but the fundamental drive...
No. You are right to compare the leaf with stoicism, but I'm saying that it's faulty because of the reasons I'm giving from the Nietzschean perspective.
His concept of will to power isn't about dominating others, but the fundamental drive behind all life, the impulse toward growth, complexity, and self-overcoming. While Stoics seek to minimize suffering through acceptance, Nietzsche sees suffering as transformative fuel for human greatness. Think about it this way. Would you rather be a stone, unmoved by the storm, or the storm itself, shaping the landscape with your force? The Stoic aims to be the still ocean.
Would you rather be the stone or the unaffected by the storm, or would you rather be the storm itself? Would you rather be the leaf in the water or the water itself, which can move leaves?
Nietzsche urges you to be the crashing wave. The Übermensch, often translated as Overman or Superman, embodies this philosophy in action. Unlike the Stoic sage who achieves perfection.
Okay, Hotolun is saying it's not natural but ideal goal. Most people will be driven by natural tendency, veiled in Maya, and goal is to become the lotus. Now that veiled in Maya is almost as easily misinterpreted as the will to power itself, because it can lead you to straight down the path of hedonism, where you might end up requiring stoicism to get back on track in life. So both are equally can be equally problematic at times. But where did the comment go? Yeah, the natural tendency. Nietzsche is saying be very aware of your natural tendencies, act accordingly, find out your natural tendencies, the good and bad, and double down on the whatever is getting you good outcomes or positive fruitful outcomes and stuff, but don't suppress all your natural tendencies. Yeah, Dada, would it be accurate to say that Nietzschean perspective talks about embracing human condition? Yes. And its contradictions? Yes. And to use that creative power for prosperity through uncertainty? Exactly. Yeah.
Shaping the landscape with your force. The Stoic aims to be the still ocean. Nietzsche urges you to be the crashing wave. The Übermensch, often translated as Overman or Superman, embodies this philosophy in action. Unlike the Stoic sage who achieves perfection through rational detachment, the Übermensch creates meaning through passionate engagement, transforming suffering and
This is a good point. After all, we all must either make meanings out of things or follow meanings made by other people, or a combination of both. So meaning making cannot happen if you think everything is Maya and let's just not react and do stuff, or let's just be stoic and not react to stuff, because you can't make meanings out of that. Meaning making will require understanding yourself and your actions and your tendencies, your inner traits and characters and stuff. Without that, it leads to inaction and हाँ चलो ठीक है अब क्या करे, हाँ बांग्लादेश से निकाल दिया अब क्या ही करे, वो माया है. That sort of a thing always comes back to haunt us. Veiling is Tirodhan, and unveiling is Anugraha in Shaiva Shakta tradition in Dvaita. Both going with the flow and realizing the flow in Dvaita, both going with the flow and realizing the flow happens on the will of Sadashiva or Tripura. Yeah, fair enough. भाई मैं जाने के बाद इतना अच्छा कमेंट डिस्कस, या बिकॉज वी आर नाउ लुकिंग एट अ वीडियो, वी आर नॉट इंटेंटली लिसनिंग टू द बुक, दैट्स व्हाई. हाँ वी एक्सेप्ट का ही करे. Space is ultimate truth. I mean, it is omnipresent, cannot be changed, and beyond time. Mane sun is occupying the same space which me and you both are occupying. Shunno sthanta to same hi ache. Yeah, that is truth, but in this case, untruth becomes more important.
Unlike the Stoic sage who achieves perfection through rational detachment, the Übermensch creates meaning through passionate engagement, transforming suffering into self-mastery. By shaping their own values instead of inheriting them, embracing contradiction as strength rather than weakness, and affirming life without metaphysical consolations, they craft a deeper, self-determined
This last line
existence.
was fun.
Consolations. They craft a deeper, self-determined existence. Consider artists who channel passionate engagement, transforming suffering into self-mastery. By shaping their own values instead of inheriting them, embracing contradiction as strength rather than weakness, and affirming life without metaphysical consolation.
Affirming life without metaphysical consolations.
They craft a deeper, self-determined existence. Consider artists who channel personal trauma into powerful creative work. entrepreneurs who fail repeatedly before revolutionizing an industry, or activists who transform their anger at injustice into world-changing movements. These aren't people who practiced stoic detachment from their circumstances. They're individuals who fully embrace their experiences, including suffering, and transform them into something meaningful. Nietzschean flourishing doesn't promise tranquility but vitality, a life characterized by intensity, creative power, and joyful wisdom. Like a bow drawn taut, human greatness emerges precisely from opposing forces, held in productive tension, rather than resolved
Productive tension.
into artificial harmony. Where the Stoics
Complexity theory. Artificial harmony is equilibrium.
sees the tempest of human passion as something to be calmed, Nietzsche sees it as energy to be harnessed. The Stoic builds walls against life's storms. Nietzsche builds windmills, transforming resistance into power. One philosophy seeks immunity from life's
Yeah, if you want examples from nature, this guy's giving those as well.
walls against life's storms. Nietzsche builds windmills, transforming resistance into power. One philosophy seeks immunity from life's chaos. The other seeks to ride it like a dangerous and magnificent beast. So would you rather be a tranquil pond or a powerful river carving its own path? Stoicism's emphasis on personal virtue, independent of external conditions, carries an inherently conservative impulse. By treating poverty, oppression, or injustice as preferred indifference that do not hinder true fulfillment,
These two rivaling ideas will, in the end, lead to different kinds of societies.
emphasis on personal virtue, independent of external conditions, carries an inherently conservative impulse. By treating poverty, oppression, or injustice as preferred indifference that do not hinder true fulfillment.
In the end, that conscientiousness versus openness discourse also comes in here, and bureaucratic thinking versus the revolutionary. After the revolution, you need bureaucrats to get on and execute the ideas that you came up with. Hence, the maverick founder hires a good boy Indian CEO, and hence, at the end of the part 1 of the movie Che on Che Guevara, one random young comrade guy, after blowing up some houses and cars, comes and says to Che Guevara, right after the revolution is over in Cuba, he says, Che, the revolution is over. Can we go home now? He says, the war is over. The revolution begins now.
Stoicism raises difficult questions. If happiness is possible even under extreme hardship, why challenge the systems that create suffering? If a slave can achieve eudaimonia while remaining enslaved, does this not implicitly validate?
Yeah, what VXT is saying here is unfortunately very true. You need a Tim Cook for every Steve Jobs. Yes, because otherwise, only inventions, only founding, only openness, only creativity, only creative destruction every day. Imagine the economic disruptions if in an ideal scenario, if that happens that quickly. Every day a new technological invention, today you are using a cassette, the next day you are using a CD, the next day you are using Bluetooth to listen to music. Imagine the kind of stress people would be in. So in the end, we need a society which allows for both kinds of people to foster and do their thing.
Existing power structures? This dynamic plays out in modern workplaces where corporate stoicism subtly reinforces compliance. Many companies promote stoic principles through mindfulness programs, radical acceptance, and the mantra of controlling what you can control, all while maintaining exploitative practices. Tech firms that encourage resilience among overworked employees, yet resist meaningful structural change, use stoicism as a tool, not for empowerment, but for endurance. By teaching workers to adapt rather than organize, stoicism becomes a philosophy of survival within an unjust system rather than a means of transforming it. Just look at Amazon, where warehouse workers face grueling conditions while the company promotes wellness initiatives that teach employees to manage their stress rather than addressing its root causes. Or consider how resilience training in schools often focuses on helping children adapt to broken educational systems rather than fixing the systems themselves. A similar pattern emerges in politics. Figures like Seneca counseled emperors on virtue and moderation, yet rarely questioned the legitimacy of empire itself. Even as he advised Nero to rule justly, he remained complicit in a fundamentally unjust system. Stoicism refines individual character, but stops short of imagining radical structural change, focusing on personal integrity within the status quo, rather than challenging the foundations of power. Nietzsche, in contrast, refuses to accept inherited systems.
Think of Stoicism versus with will to power or Nietzscheism as a difference between RSS and Hindu Mahasabha. RSS is stoic, patient, 1,000-year relevance, existence. Hindu Mahasabha was one whirlwind, came and went, but impacted many minds forever. And remember, Savarkar was himself a big Nietzsche fan.
As immutable. When he proclaimed, "I am dynamite," it was not empty bravado, but a commitment to creative destruction. Where Stoicism offers peace within the system, Nietzsche calls for its annihilation. He demands that we break from inherited constraints, burn away what is lifeless, and create something truer to the chaotic vitality of existence. One of Nietzsche's most penetrating insights is that philosophies are never merely abstract intellectual positions, but expressions of psychological types. Beyond
Exactly. This is exactly what I was getting at. In the end, it will get down to psychology, conscientiousness, and openness. I am a creative person after all. I'm a musician. That's why maybe I'm attracted to this sort of a thinking. But people who are more conscientious psychologically, just they were born that way, their brain functions that way, they will probably prefer and have a more successful life by being stoic.
good and evil, he writes, gradually it has become clear to me what every great philosophy has been. A confession on the part of its author and a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. Applied to Stoicism, this perspective reveals how the philosophy might appeal particularly to individuals with specific psychological dispositions, those who find uncertainty intolerable, who seek clear principles for navigating complexity.
अच्छा, इस टॉपिक पे एक बहुत बहुत फेवरेट कोट है मेरा नीचे से. Let me find that aphorism. I'll find it. Just wait. Give me 1 or 2 minutes. Did I not underline it after reading it 1,000 times? Why the fuck? Every time a friend comes home and asks me about my books and stuff, this is the first quote I make them listen. I remember the quote somewhat. If I don't find it in another 1 or 2 minutes, I'll just tell you guys the gist of it. It's a 2-line aphorism. Wait, okay? It's exactly on this topic. Found it, guys. Listen to this. Objection, evasion, joyous distrust, and love of irony are signs of health. Everything absolute belongs to pathology. So it's a sign of a mentally healthy brain that you are okay with objection, you are okay with evasion, you are okay with joyous distrust, you are okay with irony. So the opposite of a tyrannical king and stuff. Everything absolute belongs to is a sign of a mental disease.
This doesn't invalidate This perspective reveals how the philosophy might appeal particularly to individuals with specific psychological dispositions, those who find uncertainty intolerable, who seek clear principles for navigating complexity. This doesn't invalidate Stoicism, but contextualizes it as one possible response to human vulnerability, rather than universal wisdom. Nietzsche's own philosophy similarly appeals to different psychological types, those who experience restriction more painfully than uncertainty, who find established systems stifling. Each philosophy speaks to different existential fears. Stoicism addresses the fear of being overwhelmed by external forces and internal passions, while Nietzsche addresses the fear of diminishment through excessive control and resignation. Each philosophical system offers...
Yeah, this pretty much sums it all up, this particular section.
...to experience restriction more painfully than uncertainty, who find established systems stifling. Each philosophy speaks to different existential fears. Stoicism addresses the fear of being overwhelmed by external forces and internal passions, while Nietzsche addresses the fear of diminishment through excessive control and resignation. Each philosophical system offers medicine for different diseases of the soul. Think about your own temperament. Do you feel more threatened by chaos or by constraint? Does the thought of surrendering control terrify you? Or does the prospect of rigid self-discipline feel like a kind of death? Your answer might reveal which philosophical approach naturally speaks to your psychological needs. The Stoic and the Nietzschean don't just think differently. They experience the world differently, finding different aspects of existence painful or exhilarating. The most fascinating tension between Nietzsche and Stoicism emerges in their seemingly parallel
Boishali is asking the classic question on Nietzsche. How such a brilliant man was co-opted by the Nazis and twisted and turned into yet another toxic form of Abraham. Boishali, Jordan Peterson's explanation is that Hitler read a bad translation of Beyond Good and all of Nietzsche's works. I don't think that's a fair apologia. I don't think Jordan Peterson is right here. I think the will to power is a double-edged sword, and Hitler understood Nietzsche perfectly. He just had evil intentions in his heart. Being stoic does not make you a good human or a bad human, and being Nietzschean does not make you a good human or a bad human. It will bring out, especially Nietzschean way of life will bring out everything there is inside you. So Hitler could have done all that and not killed so many Jews, but he would be that successful. Think of Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew is, I think, any significant leader, the more famous they are, I think they are more Nietzschean. Why was Hitler reading a translation in the first place? I don't remember. It's supposed to be in German. Jordan Peterson said that it was his sister who translated it badly and stuff. I don't remember what his argument was. But I don't believe Hitler misunderstood Nietzsche. And Nietzsche, in fact, said that absolutism sucks. So he did have a pathology in his mind. He was obsessed with absolutism. He did not realize it. He thought, will to power, bro. I'll just be powerful as fuck, and I will absolutely see to the end of one race.
The Nietzschean don't just think differently. They experience the world differently, finding different aspects of existence painful or exhilarating. The most fascinating tension between Nietzsche and Stoicism emerges in their seemingly parallel concepts of fate acceptance. Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate, meaning embracing your life so completely
love of fate
you wouldn't change a single moment of pain or joy, initially appears strikingly similar to Epictetus's counsel to wish the things which happen to be as they are. Yet this similarity conceals a profound philosophical gulf. The Stoic accepts fate because it flows from a providential cosmic order, ultimately rational, ultimately good. This acceptance rests on metaphysical comfort. What happens must happen for the best within divine reason's plan. Nietzsche's love of fate acknowledges no such cosmic reassurance. His universe offers no divine plan, no inherent meaning. His amor fati represents not resignation to a rational order, but defiant affirmation despite the absence of order, a creative act that transforms necessity into chosen destiny. My formula for greatness in a human being, Nietzsche writes, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, but love it. This distinction reveals the essential difference between Stoic resignation and Nietzschean affirmation. Where the Stoic seeks peace through acceptance of cosmic design, Nietzsche creates meaning through the artistic transmutation of.
Remember, Bhairava is a heterodox deity or devta, okay? And if you want non-atheistic explanations of Nietzsche's philosophy, well, I would say I think I could at least make the claim that Bhairava was leading him down this path or up this path, and he had his blessings somehow. And in the end, and actually many Hindus have argued this, that his Kundalini awakened and therefore he went crazy in the end. So it checks all the Bhairava boxes, I think. He was obsessed with ultimate reality, not with facades.
Nietzschean affirmation. Where the Stoic seeks peace through acceptance of cosmic design, Nietzsche creates meaning through the artistic transmutation of brute necessity. Consider how differently these philosophies approach personal tragedy. The Stoic finds solace in the belief that even terrible events serve some rational purpose within the cosmic order. When a loved one dies, the Stoic reminds himself that death is natural, unavoidable, and part of a larger plan he cannot fully comprehend but must accept. Nietzsche offers no such comfort. When tragedy strikes, there is no cosmic purpose to discover. Instead, he proposes something more radical, the creative transformation of suffering itself, taking the raw material of one's fate and reimagining it as meaningful, not because it was meant to be, but because one wills it to become meaningful. The artist who channels grief into a powerful work isn't accepting fate as the Stoic.
Not Hitler. Did I say Hitler? Holy shit. I meant Nietzsche.
Stoic would, they're transforming it through creative will. Our contemporary Stoic revival, with its emphasis on emotional regulation, acceptance of uncontrollables, and focus on personal virtue, would likely strike Nietzsche as symptomatic of our cultural moment, an era where self-optimization replaces self-creation, where emotional management substitutes for passionate engagement. What is the greatest thing you can experience? Nietzsche asks, and thus spoke Zarathustra. It is the hour of great contempt, the hour in which even your happiness becomes loathsome to you, and so also your reason and virtue. True philosophical growth begins not with maxims for contentment, but with profound dissatisfaction.
Oh my god, listen to this line once more.
Your reason and virtue. True philosophical growth begins not with maxims for contentment, but with profound dissatisfaction. Look at.
And this is the problem with the Hindutva 1.0 brigade. They're obsessed with maxims and contentment, isn't it?
Maxims for contentment, but with profound dissatisfaction. Look at how Stoicism is marketed today as a productivity hack, a stress management technique, a way to become a more efficient employee or entrepreneur. The philosophy has been stripped of its deeper ethical dimensions and repurposed as a psychological tool for functioning better within existing systems rather than questioning or transforming them. In a world facing unprecedented challenges, technological transformation, democratic fragility, ecological crisis? Is calm acceptance our highest virtue? Or might we need the creative disruption Nietzsche championed? The Stoic division between what we can and cannot control might appear prudent, but doesn't meaningful change often begin precisely by refusing to accept supposed limits on what humans can transform? The civil rights movement, feminist revolution, and environmental activism all began with individuals rejecting established boundaries between the controllable and uncontrollable. Had they adopted strict Stoic principles, accepting the social conditions of their time as externals beyond their control, would these transformative movements ever have emerged? When Martin Luther King Jr. declared, "I have a dream," was he practicing Stoic acceptance of reality, or Nietzschean creation of a new reality? The philosophies of Stoicism and Nietzschean thought both address life's fundamental uncertainty but differ.
Seeger is asking a good question here. Dissatisfaction নেই হিন্দুত্ববাদের মধ্যে আছে, which is why they became Hindutvadis in the first place. They saw a reason to not be happy about, okay? Now the problem is, since reality in the end is Nietzschean, people, they are not admitting it, that they are Nietzschean. Their personal life is of that kind, contentment and maxims. Their political persona, whether as a YouTuber, speaker, author, or a politician, is one of Nietzschean, because they want to be powerful, they want the influence on people. But the way they talk about Hinduism, that shows that in their hearts they philosophically believe in Hinduism in that contentment and maxim way. Therefore, they will only be good at bhashanbazi, not at coming up with real ideas and solutions.
In their aims. Understanding when to apply, each requires recognizing the distinct challenges life presents. Stoicism serves best in moments of acute crisis, providing immediate emotional stability. When your flight is canceled and raging won't help, Stoic principles offer practical wisdom. It offers clarity and objectivity in situations that demand effective action and helps navigate circumstances that truly cannot be changed, like terminal illness or natural disasters. When emotional restraint prevents harm, Stoicism becomes a necessary anchor. Nietzschean thought, in contrast, is vital when stagnation threatens growth. It thrives in moments requiring creative reinvention, when challenging unjust systems demands passionate commitment, and during transformative periods that call for embracing uncertainty rather than resisting it. When confronting systemic racism or environmental destruction, Nietzschean creative passion may drive more meaningful change than Stoic acceptance. Moving between these approaches is not arbitrary but requires philosophical discernment, the wisdom to recognize which mode a situation demands. The true skill lies in knowing when to build Stoic fortresses and when to embrace Nietzschean dynamism.
Yeah, fair enough.
This oscillation between restraint and expression, acceptance and creation, mirrors the natural rhythms of life itself. Wisdom emerges not from rigid adherence to either philosophy, but from the ability to shift fluidly between them, containing multitudes, as Walt Whitman might say. Perhaps Nietzsche's critique serves not to invalidate Stoicism, but to contextualize it, to reveal it as one possible response to human vulnerability, rather than the universal wisdom it sometimes presents itself as. As Nietzsche himself acknowledged, there are many kinds of eyes, and consequently, there are...
Yeah, Nietzsche himself was opposed to absolutism, so why would he want Nietzscheism to become the absolute one way of doing things? He would probably agree with this guy here.
Many kinds of truths, and consequently, there is no truth. The question isn't which philosophy is universally correct, but which illuminates your particular path at this particular moment. So when facing life's challenges, ask not only, what would a Stoic do, but also, what would Nietzsche do? And recognize that the answer that serves life today may differ from tomorrow's truth. Share this video with someone who thinks stoicism is the answer to everything, or with a friend who might benefit from hearing about Nietzsche's passionate alternative. Life is too complex for one-size-fits-all philosophies, and the conversation between these two approaches might just help you navigate your own path with greater wisdom and vitality.
We are not resuming the discussion of this book today because my brain, the battery is gone. We will take it up on another edition of An Evening with Nietzsche. That's how we will continue with this book, I think. Let's see some fascinating comments here. Oh, again, VXT is saying stoicism is basically a coping mechanism. And yes, VXT, I agree. And that guy whose video we were checking out on René Girardot one day, he has a video called Why Stoicism is a Cope. Why Nietzsche thought stoicism is a cope. Interesting questions. He's saying in a natural, unadulterated, undistorted state, shouldn't a guy like Islam and a girl dislike Islam? Deep question, really. Because on the face of it, it seems very obvious that yes, but I'm trying to think, why do the girls then like Islam? Because they like stability, because again, people will prefer certain nothings over uncertain good things and stuff. So Islam definitely gives certainty to women. For men, though, definitely yes. That's the only reason Andrew Tate converted to Islam, brotherhood and stuff. Bro, my mother saying mobile ta jalon. Yes, the pause before you act. Let's see what Neon was saying. Any idea worth having is a possibly dangerous idea in the wrong hands. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not impactful enough. Does being Nietzschean help in personal life, family life, and relationships? But he didn't have good relationships with women. No, here to learn, he didn't have good relationships with women because of his upbringing. He was raised in a very, very orthodox Christian conservative family. His mom, I think, was a nun, and he was headed to be that way. He was an expert in Christianity by the time he was a kid, because he was he was a very frail kid. He wanted to be in the army and stuff, as far as I remember. But he wanted to play sports and stuff. He could not. He kept falling sick. So all he did was read and read and read. So therefore, he might not have good relationships with women. But yeah, your first question is more important. Will Nietzscheism help a drunkard, a guy who is already a drunk? No. He needs stoicism for now. Unfortunately, the answer might be a balance of those two things, or depending on you fully understanding whether you are that conscientious kind of a person or an openness kind of a person. Are you the Che Guevara, or are you the bureaucrats taking over Cuba? Who are you? It depends on that. Basically saying, what would Jesus do? Yes, Nyan is saying not having good relationships with women is a prerequisite to being a great philosopher. Hence, RSS endorses people not having wives and family and stuff. And yes, like I was discussing a few days back, being incel will lead you down to researching a lot. No philosophy can be universally applicable. Yeah. Who, where? Yeah. Sthan Kal Patro. He really need a better PR agency. Does Stoicism originate from Marcus Aurelius? No. It originates from Epictetus. And even Gita and stuff, of course. Seeker. Here you are not being fully fair to liberal, commie, atheist movements. Yes, you can say we had reformers and stuff, but the reforms we are seeing today, which we are seeing side effects of as well, this was not brought about by Orthodox Hindus. Orthodox Hindus, who are real Hindus, who have read the most on Hinduism, who are the most devout Hindus in personal life, they were fucking filing FIRs against Savarkar. And Savarkar was a Western style capitalism, Western educated guy. So never shy away from giving credit where it's due. For example, Bernie Sanders will always go around saying we are the greatest, richest, most prosperous country in the history of mankind. So why can't we just do a bit of socialism? Well, they are the most richest, most prosperous country in the history of mankind because they didn't do socialism. And similarly, what you are saying. होली शिट, अच्छे कमेंट्स खत्म ही नहीं हो रहे पोस्टी के. VXT, no. They are all sub branches of Stoicism. Because it's a system, a very, very elaborate system, no? Nietzsche is saying fuck all systems. Here to learn. I have not read up enough on utilitarianism, but I always see a misconception with utilitarianism because it's always misconstrued to be just short-term gains and not long-term gains. Long-term utility is also utility. So I have a confusion with that. Okay then, guys, let's go to sleep for now. We'll take up this very fascinating discussion some other day. I forgot to mark which page we ended on. कहाँ खत्म किया? Yeah, this is where we ended, I think. It is certainly not the least charm of a theory that it is refutable. It is precisely thereby that it attracts the more subtle minds. It seems that the 100 times refuted theory of the free will owes its persistence to this charm alone. Someone is always appearing who feels himself strong enough to refute it. Yeah, this is where we ended. On the 18th aphorism. This is where we'll pick it up. Here to learn, ওটা তো আমাদের সবার জীবনেরই. But Hindus of Savarkar's generation were already traumatized. Calling them real Hindus might be pushing it. I'm pretty sure it would be different if they had fun rights back then. Who would make the fun rights? The fun rights would be brought into existence by people like Savarkar against whom they were filing FIRs. But Bernie has a point. What is the point of being richest and strongest if your citizens cannot afford healthcare and education? You can spend just by reallocation. No, their healthcare system is fucked up not because of their prosperity or their lack of empathy and stuff. It's just a result of corruption. So, which is why, as an unintended consequence of Indian policies, no, I think it is an intended consequence. Looking at the mistakes of the entire world, India, I would argue, has the best healthcare system in the world because it's the most balanced. It has some avenue for rich, a lot of avenues for poor, which are inherently bad, but that's what you get for free, etc. but all other countries are either only for the poor or only for the rich, the healthcare system. So I like Ben Shapiro's argument on healthcare, which I think applies for all countries in the end. He says affordability, quality, and universality. These are the three aspects to healthcare. And you can always have any two of these three. You can never have all the three. So USA doesn't have affordability. It has universality and what was the other thing? I am too sleepy now. Affordability, universality, quality. Yeah, USA has quality. USA has universality. It does not have affordability. Canada does not have universality. It has quality. It has affordability. India does not have quality. It has quality somewhat. It has a lot of affordability. It has a lot of universality. So you see, it's a balance. Like Thomas Well said, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. So USA has made that choice. Canada has made that choice. England has made their insane choice. We have made this choice. You'll never have all three. Okay, thanks a lot. This was a great, fun discussion, guys. Our evening with Nietzsche comes to an end. See you soon. Good night, guys. Bye-bye.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলরে একলা চলো